I'm good. How are you?
Great.
I know.
You must be pooped, my friend. I mean, you've been running around crisscrossing the country
Yes.
on your book
I'm
tour.
I'm finally home for like 5 weeks, but yes.
Great. I'm loving what you're putting out there. I'm loving listening to your interviews. I just listened to you and Katie Couric talking about the book. I'm so proud of you. I'm so excited for you. This is just awesome. It's
Thank
like,
you.
it's very, very cool.
You're working on a book too, aren't you?
Yeah, I have a book coming out in May of 2026 with Simon & Schuster about patient empowerment. I wanted to take the lessons I've learned seeing patients for 25 years and help other people beyond the walls of my office make sense of their health. Okay, but let's talk about you, Shannon Watts. Shannon Watts is a galvanizer of women, a change maker. She is the founder of Moms Demand Action, which is the largest grassroots organization for
Gun safety.
what? For gun safety, right?
Gun safety.
I mean, and it started, if I'm remembering, by you posting on Facebook the day after, which one was it?
The Sandy Hook school shooting in 2012.
Right. I remember exactly where I was. I was watching my kids sing in a Christmas pageant when I heard the news. I think it was like December 12th.
Yep.
I remember that so distinctly. And what you did is you took a issue that is, you know, so front and center in this country, unfortunately, and you ran with it and you galvanized other people, and you didn't try to do it alone. You did it with teams, and you did it with other women, and you changed hearts and minds, and you have made changes in our legislation. I mean, there's more to go, but I think you set an example for a lot of other people who may have underestimated their talents, and that's what this book is about. It's about um, not underestimating yourself, particularly in middle and later ages. Just because you're getting older doesn't mean you aren't capable of growing and learning and changing and igniting a fire. In fact, as I said on my Instagram post today, advertising this conversation, my older patients are the ones I learn from the most. They are wise, they
Yep.
are self-aware, they give fewer Fs, and they are a little more fearless about, saying what they think and pursuing their wishes and dreams. Not always, of course. With age comes indignities and limitations and illness, etc. But I guess I want to talk to you today about that and about what you learned by interviewing the women in this book and the lessons learned. So, can you talk about the book and how it came about and
Yeah.
just where it all started?
So I decided after 11 years of full-time activism leading Moms Demand Action that I was going to step back by the end of 2023. We had just passed the first federal gun safety legislation in a generation. And I just knew, I felt like an inner knowing that that was the bookend to my activism and I needed to move on and do other things. And the organization needed new energy and new ideas. And so it was that period when I got a call from Maria Shriver who said, "Hey, I have an imprint, a book imprint. I would love for you to write a book." And I said, "Okay, that wasn't my plan, but what do you think I should write about?" And she said, "Whatever you want, what have you learned about women from your activism and your career?" And, it's just so big. And so I really talked to other authors and friends and did a lot of interviews. And what I realized that I saw over and over again in my work with women is that men are taught to fulfill their desires and women are taught to fulfill their obligations.
Yep, the shoulds.
The shoulds, all the shoulds, and that it really holds us back from what we want, from what we desire, pursuing those things, or even like making baby steps toward doing those things. And I think it's so great that we're talking right now in the zeitgeist about what women are accomplishing and doing. This is really the how. How do you, whether you're just graduating from high school or college, whether you're a young woman with kids and a career, whether you're an empty nester like me, whether you're retired in your 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond, how do you figure out what you desire? And look, women don't fear living on fire because they're weak. It's because they're wise. Like we see all the obstacles set up in front of us and we realize we don't want that blowback. And that's smart, but it's also limiting us. And so I just really want women to ask themselves, what do I want? And then go after it.
What do you think? What do you like? What when you talk to these women who you interviewed? What do you think was the biggest barrier to entry, whether they were starting, a new career or starting a volunteer project or simply pursuing like leisure in a more
Yeah,
authentic, sort of intentional way? Like, I think you and I agree that like pursuing your desires and your passions and your dreams doesn't have to be like running for Congress or
no.
starting a nonprofit like you did or, you know, saving baby whales. It can be pursuing pleasure for the sake of pleasure and bettering yourself to better others. So what would you say is like the biggest barrier to entry? Like it sounds like one of them is a mindset of shifting from like the shoulds to the I wants and like giving yourself permission to have wants and needs. But like what other practical barriers? I mean, maybe financial, maybe logistical, maybe, childcare related, maybe, caregiving obligations. Like what were the biggest hurdles you saw socially, emotionally, et cetera?
Well, first of all, what you said is so true, right? Living on fire is a metaphor for figuring out two things: what's limiting you and what's calling you. And that is something that we should all be thinking about, we should all be doing, and really figuring out what the formula is for living on fire, which I saw myself firsthand, which I've seen in other women. And it's when you practice bringing together your values, abilities, and desires over and over again. And as you said, that might lead to big things, but it might be things that are ordinary but seem extraordinary to you. A tough conversation, asking for a promotion, deciding to have more leisure time, right? All of these things are living on fire. And so I don't want to make it seem like you have to go start a Moms Demand Action organization. It might be just figuring out how to do things differently. So here's what women said to me that really was a gating factor. And of course, there are all the things that you said: economics and sociopolitical, and where you live, and what you have access to. All those things are limiting. But the number one limiting factor is a fear of blowback.
Interesting.
Whether you do
Interesting.
more or you do less, when you do things differently, people are not going to like it. And
Interesting.
that is a fear.
Yeah, it's like the coloring inside the lines, right? Like women are socialized to be the good girls, to color
Yes.
inside the lines. Like I remember during the pandemic, it's hard not to remember when I was speaking out in front of congressional committees and writing a lot of op-eds, writing for the Atlantic, sort of talking about, balancing the harms of the virus with the harms of the mitigations. Like, and that was kind of unpopular in some groups, even though we were in 2022. Um, there was a lot of blowback, and I didn't like that feeling. Like, people don't like the feeling of not being liked, right? Like,
No,
I
women.
say I say that sometimes I say I'm in the people pleaser recovery program, right? Because
Yes.
we are socialized as women, many of us are, to be demure, to be, likable and liked, to please, to perform, to caregive. And that is I think our special sauce, but it also can be a liability if we tilt in that direction too far at the expense of our own needs. So as you can tell, I have lots to say about that, but it's interesting to hear you say that that was a top barrier, is people worrying about what other people might think.
Yes. And I give my own example because I think it's such a big example that if I can endure this blowback, other people can too, which is I immediately got threats of death and sexual violence to me and to my
Yes, you
family.
did.
And it lasted the entire 11 years. And I had to make a choice early on. Was I going to double back or was I going to double down? And I didn't like the feeling of someone trying to intimidate or silence me. And it's no different for women, right? Society is going to do that no matter what. And anytime those feelings of guilt and shame are triggered in us, in women, the reaction is often to go into these behaviors that I call extinguishers in the book. You mentioned people pleasing. That's a huge one for women. But there's also perfectionism and a desire to disappear, martyrdom, which I dealt with myself, and all of these different things that are really forms of self-sabotage. And I tell so many stories in the book, and it's full of exercises and journal prompts that I think are really helpful to figure out how do you deal with this blowback. Because look, it is predictable, but none of it is personal. And if you think about, there's sort of the top three ways. I'll just give a overview really quickly that I give in the
Please.
book. What the first is to determine who is the source of this blowback. Is this someone you care about? Is this someone's personal opinion who matters? For me, a lot of it's gun extremists. I could care less. But I think women internalize blowback, and anytime we get it, we see it as a red flag, like, oh, you better turn back, right? So think about who is giving that feedback to you. The second, and I say feedback, I actually mean blowback. The second is to reframe it. And I had the honor of interviewing amazing women like Sharon Salzberg and Kristen Neff, who are experts in meditation and self-compassion. How do you sit with those feelings and endure those feelings that are engendered by blowback? And how do you just know that that is a temporary emotion and feeling and that you can get through it and get to the other side? And then the third thing is to remember that you're a role model. And when other women, maybe it's friends and family, maybe it's your kids, when they see you acting courageously, they will act courageously too. And you have to remember it creates this virtuous circle that encourages you to be more brave and encourages other women to be more brave too.
It's so true. The things you're talking about are things that I talk about in my office. As you know, my interest is in the ways in which behavioral health and emotional health affect our physical health because they do in very direct ways. One of the common ways people, try to kind of avoid hard feelings, whether it's, experiencing blowback because of something they're doing that's coloring outside the lines, is by, self-medicating with alcohol, like numbing out on Instagram or social media by,
Yep.
retreating into their themselves, isolating, right? These are very like real behavioral manifestations of an attempt to put up some body armor to protect ourselves from vulnerability. And I think you're exactly right. One of the ways to step out of those reflexive behaviors is to feel the feelings without sounding corny or cliche, but to like acknowledge that the feeling is real, to acknowledge that you can endure emotions. They are chemical reactions that have a start and a finish, and to give yourself the self compassion. Um, and it's much easier to react and to default into your pattern of what you do when you're feeling, you know, unregulated, than it is to sit with uncomfortable feelings and tolerate them. But you're right, that is something that women I think, are uniquely capable of doing when they are given the playbook on how to do it, right? Whether it's through meditation or journaling or just simply getting off social media and like processing what's going on. Um, I think that when women are given permission to like feel the feelings and not, you know, retreat, we are capable of so much. And I think you're right. You have to model this to your kids, to other women. You have to model that we can do hard things, right? Like we can do hard things. We are capable of immense
Well, and what's the worst thing
superpower.
that happens, that you fail? I mean, these are not gating factors that men often have. And I want to go back to what you said about behaviors. I talked to so many women in the book who don't even know what their patterns are. And they don't
Yeah,
know it until they
yeah,
go through these exercises. And one woman I interviewed realized like she started looking at herself all the way from when she was in dance as a kid and she decided to quit because she wasn't the best, up to becoming a firefighter and deciding that she was going to defer to the men because she was in a mostly male battalion. And she just noticed this pattern of her whole life where she would actually slow down and let others do better than her because she didn't want to succeed. There was
yeah.
this fear of what if I succeed and then I fail? And there's another woman I interview who ran for office twice in Texas and lost. And she said because she became sort of this living, breathing embodiment of what it means to fail as a woman, everyone expected her to disappear. And she looked at the guys around her, good guys like Beto O'Rourke and bad guys like Elon Musk, right? They fail all the time in public and they still succeed. They still get all these opportunities and continue to be public figures. And she was like, you know what? I'm going to take the experience I had of losing. I'm going to parlay that into helping other women. And now she runs an organization in Texas that helps train other women to run for office. And she can give her experience of having run and lost. It's not the end of the world. We can fail and still keep doing things.
That's absolutely right. And I do think at the risk of sounding cliche or like sugarcoating the indignities of aging, we we do, I'm over 50 as you are. I always thought you were younger than me, but you're older than me, which is always so delightful to hear. But that women in their 50s and beyond have the ability to cultivate a self-awareness and an acceptance that can be a superpower,
Yep.
right? Like my book is somewhat about this. I mean, about patient empowerment, but it all comes down to the Serenity Prayer. I'm not in the AA recovery program. I've walked many patients through it, but you would think I am because I talk about the Serenity Prayer so much. Meaning, the superpower we can have is when we know what we can control, and what we cannot, and what we have to let go of, and then to shift our energy, our precious time and energy into the areas where we have agency and let go of the areas we do not have control over. Like what other people think of us, what other people's impression of us are going to be if we do things differently than we have before. When we let go of the negative self-critic, right? The inner voices that say, "Well, you really shouldn't do that. You really shouldn't, that's not your kind of role in society. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't take a risk." And acceptance is a superpower that I think is unique to that comes with age. I wonder if you had some stories of when you interviewed people. I mean, I've read parts of your book, but tell me about some stories of women who had to accept some very hard realities in order to move forward.
There's so many women who are doing such amazing things at all stages of their lives. I kind of see the archetypes. There's four women who are just graduating from high school and college, women who are young and have families and careers, women who are empty nesters, women who are retired. And there's one woman who sticks out in my mind. Her name's Carol Frick. And she wanted to be an author, but she had to get a job as a phys ed teacher. She loved it, but she did it for 30 years. It paid the bills. And when she retired, she started volunteering at an animal shelter. And she came up with this idea while she was volunteering to write a novel about a couple who falls in love there at a shelter. And she went home, taught herself how to write a book, how to create dialogue, how to structure chapters, right? I wrote an entire book after she retired. And then she decided, I deserve to have this published. I'm not going to self-publish. She sent that manuscript to 218 publishing houses and was rejected every time. On the 219th time, she got a book deal from a man who loved dogs
Oh,
and became a published author in her 70s. Like just the ability to persevere and the wisdom to realize what I've done here is good. It has value. It deserves to be seen, and I'm not going to give up on it. And I think some of that does come with age, but I also think it comes with figuring out, again, back to this formula of living on fire. What are my abilities? What are my values? And what are my desires? So often as women, we underplay our abilities. And so there's exercises in the book. I ask you to list everything you've done successfully. That includes like kids' birthday parties, right? Those are all skills.
those take a lot of planning and organization. Like you could run a small country after organizing a kid's birthday party. I mean,
You can run a large country after organizing a
yeah,
kid's birthday.
yeah,
And then I ask you to ask other people what they think your abilities are because we don't often see them in
it's a great
ourselves.
point. It's a
And
great
then
point.
keep that list so that you know A, what you've accomplished, but B, what skills you still need to go get, right? Because you may
Right.
have other things you want to do. Two is figuring out your values. These change throughout your life. There are thousands of them. When I was 41 and starting Moms Demand Action, my values were protecting my family and my community. I'm an empty nester now, so it's different. And then finally, what are your desires? We all have dormant desires, things that we wish we could do. Again, that could be just having a difficult conversation. It could be starting a new business, and it
Yeah.
runs the gamut in between. But if we don't start to give voice to those desires, we'll get to the end of our lives and realize we didn't burn. And this is interesting. As you know, the most common deathbed regret in the world is that I didn't live a life authentic to me. That is not the deathbed regret from the 70 women I interviewed, most of whom were mothers.
Interesting.
Almost all of them said that I will pursue what I want at the expense of my children. That would be their deathbed regret, right? It goes back to guilt and shame. I'm a
No,
bad
you're saying that
mom.
that was a resounding theme in the people you interviewed that they said,
Universal.
wow, that they would. So say it again for the cheap seats here, Shannon.
That they were afraid their deathbed regret would be that they pursued what they wanted at the expense of their children.
That's how I mean, look, I'm a mother. I would like lie down on a train track for my kids, but I also know that I was on the planet to be more than just a mother. And that's not a sign of like righteousness. That's just
Oh,
I think that I'm a better mother because I work and I do other things. I think my kids would be driven insane if I was
you
with them
just
all the
you
time.
just you just picked up on the two things that every expert I interviewed said. There are two reasons that you should actually go after what you desire as a woman, even if you're a mom. And that is one, it is a lot of pressure on your kids to make them your whole life.
God,
They need to see that you have other things that you are important to you. And number two, you're setting an example for your kids of how they should live. If you want them to pursue your desires, you have to pursue your own desires too, right? It's
right.
a virtuous circle. So I'm on the other side of that chasm. I don't know how old your kids are, but my youngest is 25. And none of them say, "Oh, mom, I can't believe you didn't go to that soccer game in 2006 that, I played." They say, "Thank you for doing something that you're passionate about. You made me proud."
Yeah, my kids are young adults too. I mean, they will sometimes tease me about the terrible au pair that we had who, like, went out with her friends before I'd come home from work, and the kids were making pancakes, like, by themselves when they were, like, 3, 5, and 7. Ah! But we joke, but no, they I know that they've learned from me having a life outside of them. It's not to say that you had to work to make money to it's not to say that pursuing your dreams have to be in a paid way. It can be doing
No,
other things, but I think what you're saying is modeling the notion of pursuing your dreams, lighting your fire outside of being a mother, which is not right for everybody. But I think it's interesting to me to hear that so many women said to you that that would be a fear. Um, I don't think men would say that. Do you?
I don't know a single man who would say that, including my own husband.
Yes, I think that's right. It's super interesting. I actually do talk to people not on infrequently about end of life issues, and I try to have that conversation actually before we're in hospice, right? Talk about, like, what are your core values now? What is your mission? What's your vision for the next 20 years of your life? Because let's talk about it now instead of, like, when you have a diagnosis that's hard. It's hard to organize your life around that in that way when we don't really think about mortality in such a real way when you're just
Yes.
living your life, but it's a useful frame, and I think that's what you're trying to communicate in this book, and successfully, is that if you can identify and name your values instead of just going through the day and assuming that you know what they are, write them down. Like, what are they? And what are the things that you're gonna maybe regret not having tried when you're older and you don't have, lots of time left? I mean,
That's
I
a
think that
legacy, right? That's what you're
thinking
talking about.
about dying is really about a way of thinking about living, right?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about the fact that our time is finite, that we want to get to the end of our lives and know we burned. And the other thing that was interesting is every time, and this happens on my book tour too, whenever you bring up the word legacy, women are kind of like, "Oh, that's a loaded term. Like, that's big. That's my name on the side of a hospital. That's a philanthropy." It is not. We all deserve to leave a legacy. It just means that you got to the end of your life and know that you pursued the things that were important to you, the things that lit you up, that you lived a life authentic to you. And I think women should be thinking a lot more about legacy. And I have a beautiful story in the book by Sharon Brous, the rabbi, who talks about, the importance of time and thinking about our lives as being finite and constantly reminding ourselves that if there are things that we want to achieve by the end of our lives, we need to get started now, but also that there isn't a timeline. There's no clock. And in my mom's generation, she was expected to sort of disappear after I went to school. That was her job was done in society and she should find a hobby, and society didn't want to see or hear from her. And it's just so different for Gen X. We're rewriting the rules around everything from menopause to aging to who we are and what we can be no matter where we are in our lives. And that's exciting, but we have to take advantage of
Absolutely. Someone's writing in here. I feel like they've written enough that I feel like we should answer this question. Um,
it.
someone's writing, get well with Danielle's writing. I'm a mom with two littles, 5 years and 2 years old. God bless you.
Yes.
That is the hard work
That is the
of,
unglamorous heavy lifting of,
oh my God, where you haven't shaved your legs in
parenting.
a month and you're
Although wait
just,
till they're teenagers, but yes.
oh God, that's a whole other fresh hell. I am about to self-publish my fourth book to keep following what I dream and desire. That is good for you. It's a book about mom life from pregnancy through postpartum. I'm listening to your book, fired up right now, Shannon, and feeling called to bring women together to name our values, abilities, and desires. This is giving me chills.
I love it.
What do you tell women, Shannon, who feel empathetic and tired, who feel empathetic and fired up about too many things, who feel empathetic and fired up about
Too many
too
things.
many things, like you have too many passions? That's a good problem to have.
It is a good problem to have. I wrote this book thinking that we were ushering the first woman president. And that did not happen. And I thought, oh, well, will this book meet the moment? And what's interesting is it's so incredibly important right now. It ended
More
up
than
being
ever.
like whether it's personal, political, or professional, women need to figure out what makes them come alive and bring it to the world. Women are the secret sauce of changing the world. I think so much of that happens in community. I do not believe you can live on fire alone. To the woman who just wrote that, what's really fun is that women are taking this book in real life. I think it's something like more than 24 states so far, and creating bonfires, which is a term from the book. And they're working on political, professional, and personal empowerment together. So if she DMs me, she can send me a DM on Instagram or on Substack. I can connect her to those groups that are doing that right now. The other thing is Firestarter University.
I love
Free
it. I was
year,
going to ask you about that. That is such a
yeah.
great idea.
It's a
Tell
free
me.
year-long program based on the book in community. Over 800 women have signed up so far, and some men. And we are going to start in September. It's, again, when you buy the book, it's free. You go to firedupbook.com to sign up. And join this program where we're going to go through the book and the exercises and all of it in community. I just think that friendship and support and camaraderie is what is going to get us through the next however
Agree.
many years. And I think it also will cure what ails us, from the pandemic to polarization to social media. We have never been more alone. We have never been more lonely. And I think having conversations in real life with people is a balm.
Yeah, and I think women are uniquely capable of lifting each other up. We're also uniquely capable of tearing each other down, which I think can be a fear of women to not color each other lines, like fear of their own tribe. But I think glass half empty, women are, when we lift each other up, like I see you doing that, Shannon. I see you doing that all the time. Like I feel lifted up by you. I see you lifting other women up. Like it's one of the things I like about you the most. I would dare to say about you the most is that you don't believe that supporting another woman is a detraction from you. You seem to believe that lifting other women up is good for everyone. And I truly believe that in my heart too. Like
Yep.
there's room for everybody. There's no one who has your same voice or your same
No, your
POV or your
values,
same
abilities, and
style.
desires, they're all different.
It's not a zero-sum game, and so I think you're right that women, when they get together, the conversation is elevated, the conversation is more fun, the conversation is more creative, and when we give ourselves permission to own our voice and speak the truth and get real, we can we can do anything. Whether it's starting a nonprofit or taking a new career pivot or something, or whether it's just engaging in your garden in an intentional, authentic way because that's what you've always loved to do. And so talk about community and like how community has changed the lives of some of the women in your book and like what the importance of community, like what's the relevance of community in people's fires.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is I get why women have a scarcity mindset. I think that is the crux of the issue you're talking about. Like, when you don't have access to power, women only hold 25% of the 500,000 elected positions in the country. We're only 5% of Fortune 1000 CEOs. When you don't have power for so long and you finally get it, you want to hold on to it. And I actually think this is an interesting conversation given where we are in this country with Congress right now. Like, hoarding power is a
Hoarding power.
problem.
Yep.
And I decided, I'm a practicing Buddhist. And so I made Moms Demand Action sort of a part of that spiritual practice. And I decided that my power would be finite and that I would ask myself every year if I should step back. And I did that for the whole 11 years. First it was no, then it was maybe, and then it ended up being yes. I was standing in the Rose Garden as President Biden signed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act into law. And I just knew that it was the end of my activism. And I handed the torch over to another person who's now running the organization. And it not only is it good for the organization because it brings new energy and new ideas, it's good for me because I get to do other things in my life. I got to write this book. I get to do these Firestarter communities in university. I got to do the Zoom for Kamala Harris, like things I couldn't have
I
done.
was on that Zoom. It was awesome.
So I just think it's important to look at power that way. But you asked about community. I wrote a piece about the fact that I found myself at 50 with no close friends.
You said that.
Yes, even though I ran the largest women's organization in the country. And it's not that these women weren't my friends, but I was listening to a podcast and they said, if you don't have 5 people you can call in the middle of the night during an emergency, you don't have enough close friends. And I was like, oh, I can call my kids. And then they said, but not including your kids.
You're like, oh, Don.
It's like, what was the point of having 5 kids if I can't call them in the middle of the night? But, it was a wake up call for me because I realized that female friendship is so incredibly important. And it's just so different than the relationship I had with my husband, who is a lovely man. But I just, when I go on vacation with women, when I have friends who are women, it's different. And so I set out on this whole journey of figuring out how to be vulnerable and how to show up and how to pursue women who I wanted to be my friends. And I do have some other friends now that I can call in the middle of the night, I feel like. But I think that is a practice. And, if you are a woman who's found yourself in your 50s or beyond and you don't have any close friends, this is not abnormal in our time and age. But
It's
there are
not at all.
ways you have to find people with like minded values.
And you have to work at it, right? It doesn't just happen. You have to work at it. Kind of like
Yes.
dating. You have to pursue people and say, "Hey, let's grab coffee, let's grab
Yep.
lunch, let's go for a walk," right? There's nothing like the walk and talk.
Yep.
Um, but would you say, Shannon, that when you started really cultivating friends, like deep women friendships, founded on sort of shared vulnerability and like trust, did that elevated your life in ways that you didn't expect?
Oh, I mean, so many women have made such an impact on my life. I came from the corporate world. I
Mm,
had sharp elbows. Like I was a vice president of corporate communications before I was 30. I was not messing around. And I was very competitive, and then suddenly I was leading volunteers, women who didn't have to do what I said or wanted and who were doing this work out of the goodness of their hearts, and it completely changed me. It totally softened me and turned me into a different manager and a different person, and I've had so many incredible mentors, women like Lucy McBath, who came to me early on in Moms Demand Action and said, you have a very narrow focus on gun violence where you're just looking at school shootings or mass shootings, and it needs to be all inclusive of the daily gun violence that happens with handguns in city centers and not just white people, but Black and brown people. And so she completely changed my life. And
mm.
that is what happens when you figure out what makes you come alive. It helps you find your people, and those people are there for you forever and they change you. I mean, I met Lucy in the spring of 2013 and I was just with her at a book event in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago, and she's still changing my life in so
Yeah.
many important ways.
Yeah, and what it sounds like is that you were open to it, and I think being open to,
Yes.
you know, it sounds like when you're in your corporate job, you kind of had a sense of like, things and control is sort of the ideal, right? But like letting go of this idea that we're done learning or that we're, that we kind of know what to do to kind of be successful is a really good thing. Like
Yes.
relinquishing control.
Growth mindset.
Growth mindset, that's the way to summarize it. So for a lot of my patients, when they have raised their kids, and I'm talking about friends too, who didn't have a career, like, outside of raising their kids or not even didn't have a career, like, they didn't necessarily pursue hobbies or interests outside of raising their kids. I have a lot of friends and patients who come in and they feel a little bit lost in their middle age. Like they feel like, maybe regretful, maybe wistful, and anxious about the future. They worry about that word legacy because it feels so big, and they worry about what should I do with my time. I mean, this comes up quite a lot because it's often a source of anxiety, which then affects people's health in other ways. So, what is the first thing you would tell somebody who's really trying to authentically kind of reclaim their voice, light that fire? Like, what would they be like the practical first one, 2, 3 steps?
Yes, and the book lays this out very explicitly with journal prompts and exercises, but it really is going back to that formula. It is figuring out what your abilities, values, and desires are, and then it is making space to practice bringing them together over and over and over again. Sometimes you'll start a fire, sometimes you won't, sometimes it will be big, sometimes it will be small, but they all matter. This is really about pursuing fulfillment over and over again, and as we talked about, doing it in community. So those are the three things: figuring out the formula, how it applies to you, practicing it, and then along the way, understanding you're going to get blowback. You're going to have to go through the messy middle and come out the other side. And then when you do, how do you bring it into alignment with your community and your people? And then how do you just keep doing it over and over again, all the way into the end of your life?
Right. Do you also counsel women and readers of this book to like kind of define success in a different way than they might otherwise expect? Like we often define success as like
Yes.
getting the raise, getting the job, like having a title when, like for example, in health, we define success as like having a normal body mass index or your cholesterol is normal, when actually health is really about having agency and thinking about health as a process. Like, how do you define success for people?
Yes.
How would you ask them to define success for themselves in a perhaps interesting way?
This is such an important question because I interview Eve Rodsky, who wrote the book Fair Play, and she talks
Mm,
about how women can become CIYOO and complicit in your own oppression.
mm,
And we start to believe that the shoulds and the obligations that society is telling us we own are our desires. And if you really think about it, it's very profound. Like this idea that I have internalized, I call them false fires, right? Whether it's a purpose, this idea that somehow you're just born for this one thing. And if you don't figure it out in your lifetime, that you've failed in some way. We've commodified purpose like we have self care. You got to read books about your purpose. You got to make money from your purpose. Other people got to make money from your purpose. And then this idea of happiness, chasing this ephemeral feeling of happiness your whole life and that you should always feel that way, that can become a false fire. Busyness, I'm incredibly guilty of this.
busyness is like
Even right now, my book came out, and I said to my husband last night, I'm so uncomfortable because I don't know what I'm doing next. Like, yes, I still have to promote the book, and yes, I'm doing all these amazing things, but like that was such a big goal, and I achieved it. And now what? And he was like, "What if you?" And I say this in my book. I'm trying to take my own advice. Just sit with yourself in between fires and decompress and think about what you want next, and don't jump into anything just because you have to feel productive and busy. So that is a false fire too. And so
mm,
understanding again, maybe, and I didn't realize until I wrote my own book that I thought busyness was fulfillment. It is not. It is not fulfillment. And also this idea that we have to commodify everything we do. Oh, I have a passion for baking. I better open a bakery. I have a passion for writing. I better create a Substack that makes me money. Like we start to buy into these capitalistic notions of what is fulfillment, and that can derail us.
right. And that and this notion that pleasure and joy, which are deeply internal and deeply personal, are not enough, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me started about talking about, like, sexual health and women's health and, like, how, pleasure when
Menopause.
if female pleasure is sort of thought about as it's conceptualized as this luxury and this sort of, like, sidebar thing that happens to happen in a sexual relationship or in other ways. And and pleasure is just pleasure, right?
Yeah.
Like, we have pain in life and we have pleasure, and they actually should balance each other out. Like, life isn't about being happy all the time. Happiness is great. I'm not against happiness,
Yeah.
but it's about weathering the storms. It's about having the tools, and then if you have pleasure, that's not a sin. That's actually good,
A
right?
sign of a life well lived.
That's right. That's right. So, what is next for you, Shannon? At the risk of sounding like I'm trying to keep you busy when you're supposed to be relaxing, like, what is next for you? I mean, it's the Fire Starter University that everyone should sign up for. And
Yep. I so I just made a very strange move. Most people do not move from California to Florida, but I did.
I saw that.
And, for my husband's job, and I'm loving it here. I love being a blue dot in a red state. I think there's something to be said for David versus Goliath. That's probably why I took on the NRA. And so I get asked a lot, am I gonna run for office? It's certainly something I'm considering.
I mean,
Um,
it strikes me that you moving from California to Florida, which is definitely an unusual move, is a fire in the making. It's a fire. It's like a little kindling has been laid where Shannon Watts is living, and we just gotta give you some time, give you some oxygen, like, get the bellows out. I mean, you're gonna run for office, girl. You need to.
we'll see. We'll s I mean, that is something that I've always thought about for a long time, and, but, who knows? In the meantime, I will be absolutely supporting and helping other women run for office. That's a huge passion of mine. I think there's a moral imperative right now in this country for to run.
Yeah, and I think we can't wait till there's a female president to start those fires and
No.
talk about
We
it,
might not
and
see that in our lifetime. I hope we do, but
we may not. We just can't wait around, like,
no.
right? Now is the moment, right?
Yep.
To activate our voices,
And
to
Lucy,
be
you
inclusive
should think about running too.
for office. I mean, huh, I was the president of my student government in high school. The
That does
first
not surprise me at all.
the right, and I'm a first child, surprise. The oldest child. Um, I this is a tangent, but the first thing I think is probably what most people think when they get suggested, "Oh, that's a nice suggestion," but, like, oh my god, you would have to have such body armor, and you'd have to be like, you
That's
tolerating
blowback times 100.
you would just have to be so hardened, not hardened, but you would have to have such a thick skin that I don't know, as an empath, as a feeler of feelings, if I could tolerate it. Um, but thanks for the idea. I think I'm gonna write my book in the meantime, and I think I'm gonna follow your lead, Shannon, which you have done for so many women, which is giving women permission to dream big, even if your dream is just pursuing pleasure for the sake of pleasure.
Yep.
Even if your dream is just, taking a risk of being in a relationship that you didn't think you were capable of engaging in. Um, Dreams can be small, they can be big, and they're unique, they're personal. And so I think you've given so many women the playbook with this book and so many women the permission. And also you've been a role model. And I think the best thing you can do as a role model right now is rest and
Thank you, Lucy.
relax.
I appreciate. Actually, I needed that permission today, so thank you.
Yes, that is my prescription.
I
And Shannon,
appreciate it.
thanks for joining me. I think last time we ended talking about Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton. I realized that you were about knowing when to hold them, knowing when to fold them. So, yes, shout out to Kenny Rogers. And
Always end. We must always end every conversation with a shout out to Kenny Rogers.
that's going to happen because actually knowing when to hold them and knowing when to fold them is basically the serenity
When to
prayer.
walk
It's about
away and when
acceptance.
to run.
Yes, about acceptance. It's basically, it summarizes the whole thing. So, on that note, have a good rest, and I will talk to you next
Thank
time,
you.
Shannon. Thank you for joining
Thanks,
me.
Lucy. Bye.
Congrats. Bye.